Hello, so today's lesson is going to be on mymaths year 7, so watch this video because this is the video that is linked to your mymaths task this morning, so it will be really helpful for you to watch this video. Okay, so we're going to talk about finding basic percentages, so like 50%, 10%, 25%, etc. We're going to talk about finding basic percentages of amounts. So if we think about what 100% is, 100% is the total amount of something, isn't it? So if I go back, hang on, if I try and get that back a little bit, 100% is the total amount of something. So this, if this was all shaded in, that would be 100% of it, wouldn't it? If every single square was shaded in, that would be 100% shaded in. So let's think about what 50% is. 50% therefore would be half of that would be shaded in, wouldn't it? So if 100% is the total and 50 is half of 100, then 50% is the same as a half. So to find 50% of something, you just divide it by 2. Okay? You divide the total amount by 2 to find a half, or to find 50%. Let's think about another percentage. So how could we calculate 25% using that? So if we've got 0% over here and 68%, £68 representing 100% of itself, then we know that halfway would be 50%, and we know that 25% would be halfway there. So 25% would be here, and we know 75% would be up here, wouldn't we? So if we know how to find 50%, which would be half of 68 and half of 100%, 50% is half of 100%, so half of 68 here would be 34. How would we find 25%? So we know 34 is 50%. So let's think about 25% is half of 50%, isn't it? So 17 would be half of £34. So £17 is 25%. So to find 25%, you find 50% and half it again. That's another thing to remember how to do. So, or you divide it by 4. So dividing by 2 and then dividing by 2 again is the same as dividing by 4. Okay? How could we find 75%, say, of 56? So we know that 50% is 28. We know that 25% is 14. How are we going to find this missing one here, 75? Well, we could add the 50% to the 25%, so 28 plus 14. Or there's another thing we could do. We could find 14, we could use 25% and multiply it by 3, because 3 25s go into 75. And so our answer again would just be 42, because 14 times 3 is 42. But also this one plus this one is 42 as well. So that's how you could find 75%. You could find 25% first and then multiply it by 3. Here's the last kind of key percentage that we're going to talk about. How can we find 10% of 120? Okay, so 0 here is down at 0% and 120 is represented by 100%. How are we going to find 10%? Well, how many lots of 10% are there in 100%? How many 10s are there in 100 basically? We know that there are 10. So we can divide £120 by 10 to get 10%. So 120 divided by 10 would be 12, and so 10% is £12. So to find 10% of something, you divide it by 10. Okay? How could we then find 20%? What could we do? Well, if 10% is 12, then 20% is going to be 2 times that, so that's going to be 24. And so on. So let's have a look. Let's have a few examples here. So let's try and find 50% of 90. Well, 50% is half, so we find half of 90, which is 45. 25% of 40, well, we know that 50% is going to be 20, so 25% is going to be 10. So that gives you the same thing as if you did 40 divided by 4, that would give you 10 to find 25%. 10%, we know we do 150 divided by 10, which gives us 15 to find 10%. This one a little bit trickier, 10% of 23. We've got to do 23 divided by 10. Well, if we move everything to the right one place, we get 2.3. That's how we divide by 10. And then 20% of 23. Well, if I know 10% is 2.3, then 20% is going to be double that. So what's double 2.3? 4.6. Let's see if we've got those right. Lovely. 5 out of 5. Lovely stuff. So say we've got 120, we can try and use specific percentages to help us find other things. So let's start off with ones that we definitely know. So say we've got a number 120, 50% of 120 we know would be 60 because half of 120 is 60. Using this, I know that 25% is going to be half of that. That's going to be 30. And I know 75% is going to be 50%. Add 25%. So 60 add 30, which is 90. Let's have a look again. So we've got 120. Let's find 10%. So that's going to be 12, isn't it, if we divide by 10 to get 10%. 20% is going to be double that. So what's double 12? 24. 40%. No, we're fine. We're back. We're recording. That's fine. Just a little, I must have pressed something dodgy. So we're back with our 120 here. So we've got 20% here, which is 24. How could we find 40% from that? Well, 40% is double 20%. So what's double 24? 48. Let's see if we've got those right. Lovely, good. So trying to find some more difficult percentages. Now, for some of these, you might need to write some things down on with pencil or paper or anything like that. But the idea is absolutely the same. So to find 60% of something, you could use 50% and 10% and add them together. So 50% of 130 is 65 and 10% is 13. So if you add 65 to 13, you get 78. How could we find 80%? Well, I know 10%, if I divide this by 10, is 53. And then if I did 53 times by 8, then I would get 424. Now, you might need to use a pencil and paper and do some multiplication for that. To find 30% of 279, first we need to find 10%. So 10% would be 27.9 by dividing by 10. And then you would have to times that by 3. So 27.9 times by 3 would be what you would have to do. And you would get 83.7. Again, you might have to use pencil and paper for that. 40% of 43, well, find 10% and multiply it by 4 is what you could do. So 10% is 4.3, times that by 4 and you get 17.2. And then last one, you could find 10%, then multiply it by 9. Okay, so we would get 24.4 multiplied by 9, and you get 219.6. There is also another way you could do that. You could just find 10% and take it away from the number itself, because the number itself is represented by 100%, isn't it? Yeah. So there are some more difficult ones that you might have to do a little bit more working out with, but that's absolutely fine. Okay, so if you need to, let's just do a quick recap. So how do we find 50% of something? Well, we divide it by 2. Okay, divide the total amount by 2. To find 25%, you could find 50%, then half it, or you could divide by 4. Same thing. To find 75%, you could do 50% and add the 25%. Or you could do 25% times by 3. Gets you the same answer. And lastly, how do we find 10%? We divide the number by 10. And then once you've found 10%, you can find 20%, 30%, 40%, 50% just by timesing by the number that you need to. Okay. Now, if you're still not sure and you still need to have a look, you can do this lesson yourself again on mymaths before you try the task if you want to get a really good score on this. Okay. And remember, any issues or any problems, please contact me. Please let me know if I can do anything to help you at all. Okay, and once you've done your my maths task, I hope you have a lovely weekend, Year 7. Speak to you soon.